All right, it's time to roll. So let's get into it. This session is called Sales Leap, and I do want to say that it became really obvious very early on in the development of this particular paraliminal that it's way more than for salespeople, way more. I had somebody on staff who was a ballet artist, and one of the things that she said is she would always listen to Sales Leap before doing a performance. And she would get the best reviews and she would feel so good while she was in her performances. And so we kind of nicknamed this particular paraliminal Performance Leap. Now, years later, I developed one called Performance Leap, but let me explain why this particular paraliminal is so significant to any of us who have interaction with other people. It really is about the influence that we have. And if you could think about your social sphere or wherever it is you do your work or interact with others, think of it as a sphere of influence. So who you are as a presence walking into that sphere of influence is significant. So there are a couple of things that are really helpful to do prior to stepping into those situations. Number one is understand why you're doing what you're doing. Now, it's really interesting to me that decades later, an international bestseller was written on the very first thing that you have to do on this paraliminal. It's know your why. Simon Sinek wrote a book on the power of understanding why you do what you do. It is really core to everything else. And think about who you are doing what you're doing as communicating, having an influence on the world around you. Now, I'll also coach people who are working on a daily basis for a company, and it might be for a toxic boss, and they don't understand why they even go to work, and they're really angry, and they're really disenfranchised from their career path because of the work that they do. And I say, hang on just a moment. Think about why you do have that job. Well, it's to earn money. To get beyond that. Yes, of course you get a paycheck, but why would someone give you a paycheck? It's always because of the service that we provide. And the service that we provide is appreciated with the money that's given. Money is an expression of appreciation for the service that we deliver. So regardless of the job that a person has, we're always solving a problem in service of the employer or the customer. So if we can really get to the why we do what we do and get to that goal behind the goal, behind the goal, behind the goal, we're really understanding that it's about our fullest expression in the world, bringing our gifts and talents in service to others. The second thing that we want to do during this is think about some aspect of your performance that you would like to work on. So in a typical sales setting, we have what we would call a sales cycle. So it might be prospecting, an initial contact, and then our introduction, and then our presentation, and our handling of objections, our asking for the close, and then our follow-up and request for referrals. So there's a natural sales cycle in every industry where sales occur. If we could go beyond just the idea of selling and think about every performance also has a certain pattern that it follows. For example, you hear that I play classical music in the beginning of these sessions, and you know that in a normal concert, there is a part which is slow. It's beginning and it rises, and then there's a crescendo, and then there's a denouement. And this natural path there is a way that we can look at any aspect of that and enhance how we're doing it, enhance our performance on that aspect. So for example, if I'm going to get on the radio, I'm going to be on a podcast, if I'm going to be on a television show, if I'm going to be in an interview, if I'm going to get on stage and have a lecture or a course that I'm going to do, I'm always listening to Sales Leap ahead of it, thinking about what is it about those components of my performance that maybe I'm not quite as confident as I would like to be, or I would like to make sure that I absolutely sizzle, or that I remember this part of it, because I notice that every time I do this particular thing, I always miss that one thing, so I want to really make sure that I'm doing that. Well, this is a great, what I would call continuous improvement paraliminal to use, because we're constantly upgrading, up-leveling our ability to deliver that aspect of our interaction, of our influence, of our performance, of our sales cycle. The final thing that you establish at the front end is, what's a situation in the near future where you're going to have an opportunity to do this? So, even if it's prospecting, I need to prospect for new clients. Well, that's great. You got to pick up the phone, you got to dial for dollars. So, you're going to be thinking about that aspect of it, staying motivated, keeping a high level of desire. Don't let the phone ever hit the receiver, do the flash and dial the next number. The idea is, whatever part of the work that you do that you would like to enhance, think of a situation that's coming up when you're going to have an opportunity to do that. So I remember one time I was going to be on stage. We had hired a video team from the UK, and they were going to film this. It was a big presentation in front of 1,200 people. And the person who was going to introduce me was standing next to me, and I was just sitting totally relaxed, really focused. I had used the Sales Leap Paraliminal in the morning before coming down, and I was just in a really nice, reflective state, ready to go on. And he looked at me and said, "Why aren't you up? Why aren't you like jumping around, getting excited?" And I just looked up at him and smiled. I said, "I'm good." Because I had this interior space that was just full of such immense energy, ready to deliver. And he got up and he started my introduction. At that point, I stood up and I let every word, and then I let every applause as I was walking on stage just fill and motivate and radiate through me as the energy that I was ready to deliver. So it was really very cool. I just absolutely loved the idea that I had prepared, not in the seconds before, but well in advance for the experience I want to have. It was interesting. It was a 2.5-hour presentation. It was really a lot of fun. I had a blast. People loved it. They stormed the stage afterwards to ask questions. The sales at the back of the room were off the charts. It was the highest grossing performance in terms of sales after that this particular organization ever had to date. And, for me, it wasn't that I had to be crazy enthusiastic. I had a depth of my work and a true commitment. So my why, my performance, and finally the situation was present. Now, the other thing about this third aspect, so we've got the why, we've got what aspect of the performance that you want to enhance, but we've got this last one is the situation coming up in which you're going to have an opportunity to use it. Now, I'll often put that in paraliminals because I want to help you understand that in the heat of the moment where it's time to do what it is that you're pre-programming your mind to do, you might not consciously think of it. But if you've set it up ahead of time that in a situation, this or something similar comes up, here is how I choose to respond. Here's how I choose to behave. This is the result that I want to create. And your non-conscious mind gets that, so that when the situation occurs, spontaneously and automatically, and I always say this, whenever you want or need it, there it is. And that's the beautiful thing about having a communication with your non-conscious mind. It handles the details. Your conscious mind doesn't have to, because it's too easily burdened with the urgencies of the immediate that are right there. So if you think about any time we are doing what I would call mental image rehearsal, when you're pre-programming or future pacing, you're saying, okay, in that situation, this is how I'd like to perform. Then when the situation occurs, it starts rolling. Now, the other thing about this particular paraliminal, and I also do this with a number of others, there are tones that are given at these different stages in the cycle of performance. And then those tones are woven into the music that you hear, so that it fires off this loop, this sequence of events, the sequence of states. And so by mentally rehearsing at a conscious level, it drives it to the non-conscious mind, but then also working with the non-conscious mind to follow the sequence or chain of states to the ideal that you want. Boom, you're really going to have that deeply wired in. And this is why very often we'll get remarkable results and we'll wonder, wow, that went so easily. That whole thing flowed so well. I don't even know what was so different about it, but it was remarkable. People will come up to you and say, wow, you were spectacular at that. What did you do differently? You might think, I don't know. But if you trace back, you realize, oh yeah, I set this up a long time ago to have this thing occur. Now, you might also know, if you've listened to the Sales Sleep, that there is a metaphor that's being played in the left ear for your right brain. And it's a metaphor that was a pretty famous story, and I thought was made even more famous by Earl Nightingale's recordings. And Nightingale Conant Corporation presented this, and it was a story called Acres of Diamonds. And it's a story about a person who heard about the diamond fields that were happening in Africa. And so he sold his property and he went off in search of diamonds in the country. And he searched and ended up dying a broken man, penniless. Well, the person who bought his property started noticing these odd formations of rocks on his property. So he started looking at him. He thought, and he had it evaluated by a geologist. It was a raw diamond, and literally all over his property was acres of diamonds. Well, the metaphor is a great one. What we need to do is we need to look right where we are to see the tremendous opportunity for prosperity and abundance that's right next to us. Very often we'll look to other horizons. I've seen this very often with people who are trained to be coaches and trained to be leadership coaches, and they can't wait to leave their job so that they can go and pursue this career as a leadership coach. And I'll often say to them, well, have you thought about practicing your leadership coaching right where you are. And most of the time, people haven't thought of it. And I say, well, let's practice now. Because yes, one day when you do leave this, you'll be able to have your own business, hang out your shingle, do that kind of work. Be skilled. Mine the diamonds that are right here in your own backyard. And so I want to encourage you to think about any application of improving your influence within your sphere of influence. Doesn't have to wait for a big opportunity someday in the future. It can be right now, can be right here, can be today, and you can help achieve an important objective for the people that you serve. So with that, I think we're going to wrap it for today. Thanks very much for participating. Peace and blessings. We'll see you again in our next session. Great to have you here. Bye for now.